Hey there. What's going on, everybody? Happy election day. And hopefully you all went out there to vote and are just hanging out with me right now for a little bit. I got a live video I wanted to bring to you. So every so often I find different articles and videos that are inspirational that talk about debt payoff and just whatever. Debt payoff, success stories, personal finance, cleaning up your debt, stuff like that, budgeting, all that good stuff. I happened to come across this one article. I'll put a link to it here in the notes. Let me do that real quick. How this particular couple had paid off over $30,000 over a 3-year period with one income and I think that's the right one. With one income and only one income and 5 kids. Can you imagine that? We have 3 kids and had 2 incomes up till recently. So I can only imagine the level of stress for this couple, Andy and Melissa. Yeah, I can't even imagine. So anyways, I don't think that's the right one link, but I will find the new one and put it up here real quick. Anyway, so this couple, one income, 5 kids. Andy is a pastor, and Melissa's a stay-at-home mom. Okay, so it certainly can be done with one income, but it's just inspiring for me to see, you can do it on one income, you can do it with a boatload of kids at home, and they did it in a 15-month time frame, so they knocked it out pretty quick. So that second link there, how one couple paid off $30,000 in just 15 months. So, anyways, they had an interesting story because neither of them really wanted to kind of take ownership or responsibility of their debt and of their burden, if you will. They said they called it playing hot potato for a while and just kind of pushed it back and forth onto each other. One of them would take care of the money in the budget for a while, and then they would shift it back to each other, kind of bounce it around, which is not ideal. So they did that for a while. Obviously, it didn't work. And then they kind of reached a breaking point where they had accumulated up to $30,000 in debt on a home equity line attached to their house. And then they would rack up debt in other places and then dump it on the line of credit because they thought it was considered good debt because it was attached to their home, which is an asset, which isn't really, because it's costing you money, especially when you have a line of credit attached to it on top of a mortgage attached to it. If it's money going out every month, it's not really an asset. Even though it does appreciate in value, it's costing you money every month. So in terms of where you'd want to hold it, in terms of debt, out of all the debts, yeah, a line of credit is probably the better one. It's still kind of the lesser of all the evils, right? Because the interest rate is lower, yeah, it's good, but it's still not an ideal place to hold that, out of everything. It's better than maybe a credit card or any other kind of loans, but even still, it's still debt, and it's still not really serving you by any means. If it's attached to an asset that's performing, that's producing an income, that has a growth potential, that's a little bit different. If it's attached to a piece of real estate that is invested, you have a tenant in there, or you have a business that's returning a certain amount of income or providing an income for you, that's different. That's a different kind of investment, more on the asset side than just racking up debt for home improvements or for cars or for clothing or for junk for the kids that they probably don't need. Like, those are all things that don't provide any return or provide any value, and yet just go down in value and are treated as liabilities and just add to the stockpile of debt. And trust me, I've been there. We've had all that junk piled up into our debt pool before. And this couple even at one point had $30,000 in debt and then paid it back or paid it down and then racked it up again. And man, can I relate to that. We had 80 something thousand, 82,000 the first go around, and paid it down just to about 10 or 12, and then moved to a new house and continued to rack up more debt all the way back up to 90 something. And we're on the second down slope right now, the second downswing. So we're working our way back down. But I can relate to that. You get cocky and you feel like you've got this thing handled, and you don't put the shovel down, right? So then you continue to dig the hole, even though you think you're almost out of it. You don't put the credit cards away or continue, stop adding to the debt because you think you can dig yourself out of it. And really, the only way to dig yourself out of it is to put down the shovel, right? So, um, so they said they put it all in a home equity line, dumping where they would accumulate debt in other spots, and then would dump it into the smaller interest rate. It makes them feel better that they had the debt because it was good debt, right? Which, as it turns out, it's all bad debt. It doesn't really matter unless, again, it's attached to an asset or to a business or something that would provide an income or provide a return of some sort. So they refinanced it, built it back up, and then from there they realized that they needed to come up with a plan. They needed to figure something out, so they started budgeting diligently. And on this particular site, they used the YNAB You Need a Budget platform, which is great. I actually started using it not too long ago. It's an easy way to organize and coordinate all of your info, and I like it. We've been doing kind of a manual spreadsheet for a long time, and wanted to try this out and give it a whirl and see how it goes. Just within the first week and a half, 2 weeks of doing it, and so I'll provide a little bit more input as time goes on. But I like it quite a bit. There's an app that's easy to use. You can log into the computer and input your data. It automatically uploads your transactions from your bank, so you can stay organized and sort those transactions each month or each day as they come in, really, which is great. So as the month goes on, continues and completes, I'll have kind of a full 30 days of that experience and see how it organizes and how things work. So that'll probably be one of my live videos here in the future, as to an experience on that budgeting software. So they had some friends that were using that particular budgeting software. They had an experience with that. They started diving in, head first into that and getting organized. And, budgeting is not, probably something that everybody's open to or receptive to. But I do believe that in some fashion, you need to have accountability to what you're spending. I don't love it either, but when you put something back in front of yourself and you review your transactions and you review what you've spent, it's really hard to have any kind of hesitation as to, oh man, I really probably didn't need that, or I overspent here, or whatever it might be, because you're looking back at it, in plain writing. Just like if you're trying to account for what you eat, it's harder to account for what you eat when you don't have something to review, when you're not writing it down. If you're trying to reduce your calorie intake, or you're trying to make better eating choices, right? So from there they figured out that budgeting wasn't probably something that they were inclined to do, and yet they pursued it anyway because they knew that their goal overall was to get out of this hole and provide for their family and move forward and allow and flourish financially, right? And they knew that they couldn't do that with this debt hanging around their neck. So one thing that was pretty creative by Melissa in this story, she had found just a jar, a spice jar actually. She kept it in her kitchen, and then every so often she would add a few dollars to it. Whether it was, she said she'd return something at the store and ask for cash back instead of a store credit, and put that money in her jar. Or she would find little bits and pieces here of just saving, right? And then she would add it to her jar. And over the course of that year, she had all of her jars of money, and she ended up having $1,300 saved up, right? And that's a lot of dough. So she was so excited when she found that dollar amount in there. She hadn't counted it up to that point, but that was something that they were able to apply directly to their debt, and that just kind of gave them more motivation, more encouragement. And so that's a definite possibility, or a definite strategy that anybody could apply, right? Whether it's, I've got an app that I use that rounds up every transaction that we have, rounds it up to the next dollar and puts it into a savings account for our kids. And so it's a way for us to build up savings for them, starting to save for college and stuff like that, and tuition. And so it just, that forced savings when you don't even really think about it, or in her case, it is, she's thinking about it, but it's more a behavior change, right? are amazing opportunities and amazing choices to make. So from there, they realized that they could be, doing a little bit better, reviewing their budget, reviewing what they're spending, and continue to reduce their spending and apply all of that towards their debt, towards their goals. So they finally got to the point where rather than, you know, one of them handling the budget and getting fed up and then pushing it back on the other person and really having a disconnect, they got to the point where they were communicating and they were on the same team and moving forward with the same goal and the same purpose. And that's really where that synergy, right? Instead of rather it be 1 + 1 = 2, is really that synergy of 1 + 1 = 3 because they're working together, and so to speak, they have that cumulative effort really creates more than a two-person effort, and especially when they got their kids behind them and understood where the goal was and where they were headed. That's really where that kind of that magic can happen, right? So they said they might even disagree on certain things from time to time, but they know that the compromise was there because they had a common goal, right? So they really zeroed in and were able to focus in on what their debt payoff was and crush that goal over that 18-month period. Okay, and really understood the opportunity cost, right, of having 5 kids. Going out to eat was, they said that you can't go to a restaurant for less than $60 when you got a family of 7, right? And I can attest to that even now with a family of 5. It's not cheap by any means. So a side benefit of this is that one of their oldest children was started doing their own budgeting and starting to work on their own, and there was some benefits to that because they were seeing from their parents' behavior. They were starting to do their own budgeting, and the child was starting to work on their own to start saving because they knew college was coming up. And so those behaviors and those actions by the parents were starting to trickle down to the kids because they were noticing a change in their behavior, which is amazing, right? And then from there, they continue to cut off certain expenses, right? They're making PBJs every day, and they're still, taking some vacations, but not anything extravagant. And certainly being very mindful of their spending. And like I've said before, it's not something you have to do forever, but it's something that you might have to do for a temporary time until you're able to move beyond this phase, that crunching phase of not spending too much on your life so that you can redirect it towards your debt. And then once that's done, that opens up another door, and you're moving forward from there. So one other nice thing I took away from that is they did something where they had a big canvas on their wall, and it was a reminder to the entire family as to what they were doing. So they listed their debt, and basically it gave them a sort of focus and a reminder, and it was in their kitchen. So every time they saw it, it was a reminder of what they were focused on, what they were working on as a family. And so that daily reminder, you're sitting down at dinner, and you've got that daily reminder of what you're working on. It makes you think twice about spending money on something you really don't need, and allows you to reaffirm and refocus on that long-term goal, which is great. And so from there, they paid their debt off, and have continued to stay open with their money habits and their spending habits and their budgeting habits. And it's obvious that those behaviors have trickled off and trickled over to their kids, which is amazing. So a few things I took away from that is, they didn't get on the same page until it became kind of, until they reached a critical point or a breaking point. They had that debt, they racked up $30,000, paid it off, and then racked it up again. And that's kind of where they realized that they had hit a brick wall, so to speak, and needed to come together and come up with a game plan. So if you're not at that point, if you're not quite at that breaking point where you're, literally barely making ends meet or considering something like a bankruptcy, have that conversation before you get to that point. Don't let it get that far. Don't let it get that bad, right? And set some of that pride aside or that ego aside and realize that, hey, we're in a mess and we got to figure this out together because we can't do this on our own. And we can't do this individually, not working on the same team. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, right? And one other thing, too, that I took away, of course, that I've experienced on my own is shuffling debt around generally doesn't work unless when you're doing the shuffle, so to speak, the shuffle from, in their case, the line of credit, from other debts over to the line of credit, there has to be a shift in behavior. There has to be a shift in mentality from overspending and materialism to debt payoff and conservative mentality in terms of what you're spending, right? You can't just move it from A to B and expect the debt to go away. You've got to pay it off. You've got to make it go away. And the way that you do that is stop overspending. The final thing is those small changes do add up, right? So she had that basil jar. Yeah, it was basil, and I don't know if it still had basil in it or she was just adding cash to it after it was emptied out. But she had it in her, in her kitchen, and every so often she'd add a couple bucks here and there. And it might not sound like a lot, but obviously it was $1,300 over the course of a year, and that's a lot of dough. So on a 60,000, I don't know, I think they made 60 grand a year, right? And they had 30,000 in debt, so $1,300. That's pretty good. That's a good chunk, right? That makes a difference, certainly, for money that you probably wouldn't have even noticed going by the wayside, because it's a few bucks here, a few bucks there, and it doesn't really, you don't see it. You don't even think twice about it. Or that roundup feature that I mentioned. Things like that, that auto pay, that auto save, where you're forcing that savings and you get used to it and you adjust to a new normal, and before you know it, that money is gone. But it's moving in the right direction, as opposed to it just going out the window towards a $4 coffee or going out to eat or stuff on Amazon that you don't need. So, all good stuff. I like this article. Again, this is on YNAB. It's the second link I said there. Again, how one couple paid off $30K in just 15 months. So reread that for some inspiration. Go to my site, debttoabundance.com. Check out my 5 stages of money quiz to see where you stand. My course is being launched January 4th. I'll be excited to see you in there. Again, that's debt, DEBTTOABUN dance.com. Right there. See it on there on the board thing. Oh yeah. And that's it, everybody. I appreciate you spending some time with me. I'll be doing another live here in a little bit. Trying to do one a day. I missed yesterday, so I'm catching up. Thank you for your patience. If you didn't already, go vote. We got a little bit more time left. It's 5:20 my time Eastern, so you got a few more hours at least. And do your civic duty and vote. I don't care who you vote for. Just go do it. All right. Ciao. Have a good night. Later.